Welcome to Mitchell Elf. Our theme this year is Adaptations, and this unit is Thorns and Threats, and this is Center 1. Take a look at the Observation Center. I want to take a minute because this is the center with all the items from the Museum of Nature and Science to remind you that, as it says in the outline, these items are valued at over $1,000, and the museum has been very gracious and helpful in lending these items to us, and so we need to take extra good care of them, and that means doing the following. First of all, students should be seated when they are viewing these items. They should not be walking around. These items should not be passed around as if you were doing a group presentation to the whole class. It's intended to be used only in Center 1, not as some kind of Jack Hanna live thing. Number 2, the items that are in the containers need to remain in the containers and should not be removed for any reason for the containers, which therefore means students are basically only allowed to touch the ram skull and the turtle shell. And when they do touch those items, they should just use a 2-finger touch. These things should not be being picked up and passed around. If you want a different view of them, an adult should move them or resituate them. And again, all of the other items this time around are in containers or boxes, and those boxes should not be opened at all for any reason. There are magnifying glasses in the center bin box that you can use for observation, and they will really actually work quite well at giving you some close-up views of these various items. These items are all being used to illustrate the adaptations that animals and plants have made in order to survive, and these are specifically focused on their defense adaptations. If any item breaks or becomes damaged, it is super important that you email us at mitchellelf@gmail.com immediately so that we can know, so that we can let the museum know. It's just helping to preserve our relationship with them. And then lastly, the ram skull does rule, and so what I need you to do when you get this out is take the lid off the bin that it comes in and turn it upside down, and then put the foam inside of the lid, and then put the ram skull on top of that. The ram skull is quite heavy, so please be careful yourself while you're lifting it up. And again, students should not be rocking it. They should be doing a 2-finger touch. And the 2-finger touch symbolizes and hopefully ensures that kids are not poking, pushing, grabbing, picking up. They're just touching and feeling the texture, feeling what the different parts feel like, and getting that kind of sensory input in their observations. But again, not picking up, not passing around, being super careful. So the objective or the goal of this center is for students to examine the defense strategies of plants and animals by observing adaptations that are displayed in the samples. In addition to these samples that the museum has lent us, we suggest that you bring in some supplemental samples, specifically of plants. You could go out and gather some yucca leaves, and other rosebush stems would be good with the thorns on them. Any other kinds of plants that you can think of that have some kind of defense to them that helps them survive, helps them keep from being eaten by predators, things of that nature. Before you start, you might want to first of all go over the handling techniques and requirements and expectations for the items from the museum, but also in this center there are a lot of examples of adaptations in these laminated sheets, which are there's at least a dozen of them probably about in here, and you can go through and pick out the ones that you think are interesting. There's one whole story that came from, I believe, a Ranger Rick called Fooled Ya, that's about animals and plants that have adapted, and it says April Fooling goes on all year long, and so these are examples of how plants and animals fool other potential predators to stay safe and to stay hidden and to stay alive. So as always, go over this kind of stuff first, and then you can talk to the students about when they examine the different items that they're looking at, to think about what defense strategy that animal or that plant might be using at that time, and see if they can also come up with some similarities between them. If they can determine the defense strategy, it might be prickly, it might be a hard shell, or things like that, for example. And then it also have the students talk about, well, what animals might try to eat the ram? What might be a natural predator of the ram? What would be able to get around those very heavy and formidable horns? And any other questions that you can go through and think up that would help the kids start thinking about what, like why the porcupine would need these quills, what they would be for, and again, if what animals might be able to get around the defense and be a predator. Same thing would go for talking about, there's a tarantula sample, and a black widow sample, and a scorpion sample. And so with those, it would be the venom. A defense strategy of the rattlesnake is its tail, right? And it will rattle. And unfortunately, you can't take this one out of the box, but you can give them an idea and talk about how it rattles. Maybe you could, on your phone or on a tape recorded device, look up the sound of a rattlesnake rattle and play that for them. This is the spine of a stingray, and so you could talk about like the serrated edges that really just can gash into things and kind of help protect it. So anyhow, whatever angle you want to pursue this on, and look up and gather information that helps students talk about and think about the adaptations and the defense strategies of plants and animals, would be perfect. If also it says in the outline, if you have a pet turtle or a bearded dragon or another pet that displays an interesting defense strategy, you could bring it in, but you need to ask for teacher approval on that. And I think that's about it for Center 1. Again, I want to emphasize that these are on loan to us, and it is very thoughtful and helpful that the museum and Mitchell Elementary have this relationship where we can borrow items. So please do your utmost best to organize this center in a way that the students can observe the materials, but are not handling them, not passing them around, and are just being respectful and very careful. And I would also go so far as to say, if you've got a group of students that aren't listening, that aren't behaving, that it might not be a good thing for them to get to see these samples, and that they might just look through and talk about the adaptations using these laminated sheets. So if you have any questions, or you a student accidentally damages an item from the museum, or you find the items damaged when you open the box up, please email me at mitchellelf@gmail.com. Thanks.